So, part of my dad's rules was I had to have a market before we could raise anything. So it was one of those, how do you find markets? And initially, straight out of the gate, I was just like anybody else, that there's no markets out there. My only choice is the local grain elevator. And thankfully, the grain elevator that we deliver to they take 8 different crops at their different locations, depending upon the location. So they have some pretty good options. But I was wanting to raise some stuff like buckwheat, because buckwheat does phenomenal things for the soil, but the closest buckwheat market to me is Mindac. Well, at the time, was Mindac, which is the Minnesota Dakota's Buckwheat Growers Association. They shortened it to Mindac for obvious reasons. And with that, I contacted them, and they're looking for growers. They will actually write you a contract today. They'll help you source the seed. The great part about it is their delivery point is either Grand Forks or Dickinson, which is a long ways from here. It's a long ways from me. But when they write the contract, they'll determine how far away you are, and they will increase the value of the contract to help you cover shipping. It's like, okay, that's great. But I'm having to do this, and I'm having to figure out how to market things. So like I said, we have a 2,000 acre dryland operation. We started looking at soil health in 2017. We've raised 12 crops on average the last couple of years. People ask me what those 12 crops are. We raise an open pollination corn and a non-GMO corn. So open pollination allows me to use my own seed. The interesting thing is you listen to Dr. James White, who talks about soil microbes, and he says the microbes in the soil, inside every seed is the microbes you need to grow that seed. The problem is if you import that seed, the microbes in that seed might not be compatible with your soil, and it takes 3 to 5 generations for the microbes in your soil to move into that seed and make everything work right. And we've seen it when we bring bean seed in out of the Dakotas. But we're going to see what it does with corn. Interesting enough, that open pollination corn yielded as good as my worst hybrid this last year. So I think it's got some possibility, especially up in our part of the world. On a really good year, the open pollination is not going to touch a hybrid. That hybrid is going to outrun it every day. But on an average year, it'll probably be able to run pretty close. In a poor year, that open pollination corn will beat the hybrids, because at that point it'll be acclimated to our area. This next year we'll have both red and white milo, millet, oats, sunflowers, camelina, buckwheat, black-eyed peas, rice, and we're going to try some sesame this next year. Sesame likes hot and dry. We do hot and dry pretty darn well. So we're going to see how it does. When I started doing direct sales, I was doing things like dry beans, honey, honeycomb, chickens and eggs, things that are real easy to take from my farm and sell to the consumer. It's a real easy step. So that's one way I was starting to develop markets. We started doing some processing. We make gluten-free mixes now. We have our own malting company, or our own milling company. We do beauty products with the beeswax. If you want to talk about some high return dollars, those beauty products use a little bit of beeswax with some other ingredients, and they bring a pretty good price. And making candy out of honey. It's called honeycomb. It's delicious. And man, it is like crack cocaine. People that once they start eating it just cannot put it down. But this is kind of where I started in my marketing. We already talked about where we were when we took over. Most of our sales was the local co-op, or there's an oilseed crush plant in Goodland, Kansas. It's now closed. That's where we were going with it. We didn't have livestock. We used to. You can see the corrals. We had 30 head of mama cows. Did cow-calf operation. We just couldn't take care of them anymore. We just didn't have the manpower. I do miss them, especially right now. Cattle market is up very well. Getting good price out of those. but I do not miss them when it's 20 below and the wind's blowing like crazy and the snow's sideways and everything's frozen up. Absolutely do not miss those. But this is where we were. Here's the updated list. I think I remembered pretty much everything that's there. We're actually going to try some biochar this year. Right now, half of our sales are still the local co-op. I don't mind the commodity market. It has its place. But a lot of stuff we're doing now is specialty market. I'm skipping that first step. I got a seed cleaner. And I'm selling to the malting companies. I'm selling to the milling companies. I'm selling to the people that the co-op has been selling to. They value me because of quality. They know I raise really good stuff. And before, when I delivered to the elevator, they would mix my really good stuff in with the neighbor's really crappy stuff, and it helped them out. It didn't help me out. They were able to blend stuff up and raise the quality enough to be able to meet their standard. They docked the neighbor. They paid me a little bit extra, but it wasn't for that difference. So by going direct to that other specialty market, I can capture that money. That's where the challenge is. How do you find those people? And that's what we're going to talk about. So we started, and we were driven by soil health. We needed diversity. We didn't have livestock. I didn't want to raise livestock. So what can I do? And Dad's like, you got to have that market. And the first thing we did is we raised field peas. Spring field peas, and they weren't great. But the local elevator took them, but it was diversity. And the other advantage with those is that's what I used to replace fallow. We ran the numbers, and for us to do fallow cropping ran us $75 to $125 per acre of expenses per year. So that's what it cost for me just to lay dormant. So at one point, Dad came to me and he goes, so how are we doing on those field peas? Are we making any money with them? And my response was, as long as we're losing less than $75 a year, an acre, we're making money. Because that was our cost. So sometimes it's not the money you spend is your cost, it's the money you don't lose. And that was one of those cases is we weren't losing money buying herbicide to be no-till, so we essentially could pocket that difference and see that. I wanted to add buckwheat. Buckwheat will actually take the phosphorus in your soil that is not available to plants and mineralize it, and so it is available to the following crop. We ran soil tests on that, and we found that it actually gave us about 5 pounds of phosphorus per acre per year. The really interesting thing is it gave us 9 pounds of manganese per acre per year. Manganese, if you've never paid attention to what manganese does in your crops, it is the main component for photosynthesis. So if you don't have enough manganese, your plants won't photosynthesize efficiently. If it also is the molecule that'll open and close for plant respiration. And so if you don't have enough manganese, that plant can't shut down when it's hot and dry. It just sits there and it'll just leak moisture. So adding buckwheat actually made the following crops more resistant to drought. So our focus was initially on soil health. What can we do different? So that buckwheat, it's like I had to find a market. Believe it or not, I started cold calling people. Get out the phone book, the yellow pages, believe it or not, they still print the thing. And I would like, who uses buckwheat? And I was having zero luck. It was one of those I was calling companies, nope, we're not interested in buckwheat, we don't use buckwheat, blah, 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 blah. Or are you organic? That's always the fun one. It's like, I'm not organic, I think I'm better, but that's my opinion. So I was talking to a neighbor who raises seed wheat. Well, the one thing you absolutely don't want in your wheat is buckwheat, because you can't sort buckwheat out without a color sorter. And so somebody had called him and said, would you raise buckwheat? And they said no. But when I talked to him, he goes, well, there is this gal that called me, and he looked it up in his phone and goes, well, here's her phone number. Took 5 calls before she called me back. I am persistent. So in that, I talked to her, I told her what we were doing with soil health. I said, I raised buckwheat. She goes, can you clean it? It needs to be gluten-free. Well, thankfully, we just bought a combine. We had our old combine, so that problem was solved. I actually had to find a custom cleaner that first year until we bought a seed cleaner. But it's that finding out who raises or who uses or who needs. Now, people find out I raise buckwheat. Cover crop companies call me all the time. By chance, do you have any buckwheat just sitting around? So that is what drove us. We were also driven by the need to meet customers, because people in the city talk about how horrible farmers are and all the horrible things we do to our soil. So my dad always says the most important thing for a farmer to do is to educate. And how are you ever going to meet people in the city unless you have something for you to buy? So it's one of those, I did not intend to be profitable. I was going to farmers markets to meet people, to talk about agriculture and why farmers were important. So these are some of our first products. Buckwheat honey, if you've never seen it, looks like used motor oil. I mean, it is black. It also is delicious. It's not super sweet, tastes kind of like molasses. We did eggs, wheat berries, cracked wheat, all of these things we were selling in markets. The problem is when we started doing this, then we had, it's like, well, what do you do with it? We have this grain, it's not ready for consumption, so we need to clean it for our own use if we want to use our seed again, or to sell it to processor. The other problem is we had a storage. We did use a CCC loan. People complain about government money. You know what? We went to the government, we borrowed $140,000 to build those bins. Our interest rate is 0.6%. I would rather be using our government's money than let them ship it somewhere else. American farmers should be more than happy to use that, because by golly, the American people get a lot of value for their money. And we're going to do a good job, and we're going to repay it too. It comes back. So we use those CC loans to be able to solve that. So our first grain cleaner is right here. It's an air density cleaner. It's a stream of air, and you trickle the grain through it, and the heavy grain drops first, and it's like a gravity table, but not. It's like 20, 30 bushels an hour initially until you learn how to run it. It was painful, but that's what we had. We bought a rotary screen to separate chickpeas from flax because we were intercropping them. Found all this stuff used on auctions. It's out there. You have to learn how to use it. And there's a learning curve there. You're farmers. You figure out a lot of things. You can figure out, this is my magic machine. I tell people that. This is a Clipper 248 BDH seed cleaner. Running dry beans, I can get almost a semi-load an hour through that thing. It's got 2 shoes. When we got it, it needed a little love. It didn't take a lot of love to get it going. It runs so smooth. It is so amazing you're running it. Sometimes if you're not running tractors to run hydraulics, we usually do because we can variable rate all of our speed, all of our stuff with our hydraulics. The only thing you hear in that seed cleaner is the grain running through it. It runs so smooth. It was built in 1969. They don't build equipment like that anymore. That clipper will run forever for us. I call this my magic machine. The grain that goes in the top there, when it comes out the bottom, is worth twice as much. So I'm cleaning millet right now. Millet's worth 7 cents a pound. When it falls out the bottom, I'll sell it for at least 14 cents a pound, as high as 20 cents a pound. All because of this machine that cost me $5,000 on an auction, a little bit of work, and I had to buy some screens. If you have a seed cleaner and you're looking for screens, QC screens, quality control screens out of Michigan, you send them a sample of grain and they'll even tell you what screens you need. They build really good quality screens. They are really good guys. I highly recommend them if you're looking at doing stuff like this. But that's how we were cleaning it. Then we take it to the next step. So either we're selling it to the malting company, we're delivering this stuff to the malting company initially in totes. It was a pain in the butt. We started delivering so much stuff, they put up a hopper bottom bin just to take our deliveries because that way we could do a semi-load. We started delivering it. I know nothing about seed cleaning. So I there with the owner, I open up the bag and I said, well, what do you think? She looks at it and she goes, that's the cleanest buckwheat we have ever received. I'm a farmer. I don't know how to run these things. They're not that hard to run. Nothing against the guys that run those for a living. None of them turned down a job offer from NASA to go run a seed cleaning facility. Don't have to be super sharp. You just have to be particular. And you have to be picky and you have to think about it. But if you care about your product, if you want the reputation of quality, you'll figure it out. I have actually rejected my own stuff. I cleaned it. I'm like, that's not what I expect for myself. I called them up and I'm like, I'm sorry, we're not going to deliver a half a semi-load at twice market. And they go, why? And I said, I'm not happy with the cleaning quality. I send them pictures. They're like, it's okay. I said, no, it's not. I'm sorry, I'm going to deliver this to the elevator because I expect more of myself. You have to have that ability to walk away for some money because in the future, they will remember you deliver quality. It's all about quality. So we actually got to the point where we were making these little mixes. I had this little tabletop mill and I was mixing up mixes by measuring cups. Seriously. Putting them in a little bag, put a little sticker that I printed out, selling them to farmers markets. Remember, I'm not making any money with this. That's not my goal. My goal was to educate consumers. The local COVID happened. The local food pantry called me up because they had gotten a grant from the Colorado Department of Ag that if they had Colorado Proud, which is a labeling that the Colorado, if it's a Colorado products, if you have that labeling, the Colorado Department of Agriculture would reimburse the local food pantry for whatever they bought. She calls me up and she goes, I want 600. And I'm there with my measuring cups and it's like, this is not going to work. So I learned how to weigh things into a bucket and then stir it all together and then weigh out of the bucket and back into the little bags. That was great. Until the next year, she ordered that and then she called back and ordered another 600. It's like, I can't do this way. So, well, and then we started fighting with the insurance company because crop insurance is like, you need to track every pound of grain you use. And I said, well, that's funny. I haul a semi-load to the elevator and that scale is accurate to maybe 20 pounds. So you want me to like to the pound, but you don't care about the commodity stuff? They don't like it when you point out problems with the system, just to let you know. So we now have Haxton Heritage Mills. We spun off a company. That is our new mill. We got it from Austria. Our old mill could do 35 pounds an hour before it overheated. And then I had to wait 2 hours before it would run again. I could do 1 kilogram a minute with that, 2.2 pounds a minute with this thing. And it's really cool because I have a sifter and so I can run corn in this, and the first one I get masa, the second one I get cornmeal, and the third one I get grits. And then there's a discharge on the end for my bees wings that don't go through my screens. So now I can do 1 milling and do 3 different products. This is an industrial powder mixer. I can mix about 50 mixes at a time. And they are perfectly uniform. They are gorgeous coming out of this compared to my 5-gallon bucket. I dump it into the top of this. This is a bagger. There's a little electronic eye. You put my finger over it when I have the bag in place and it dumps in 332 grams of brownie mix every time. And then I run it through my sealer. So it's scale, it's what are your goals? Does your family have this recipe that you could use what you raise on your farm and sell it? You start by selling it at farmers markets and then it gets popular. And then you start dealing, we're actually going to be working with an online grocery delivery service in Denver and be there. And from that, we're going to then, who knows where we go. But these are the processes that you have to go through when you start doing this. These are the things that are possible. You know, to me, food is community. We are the most important part about bringing America back together, is by being able for people to sit down and enjoy food that's healthy, that's delicious, that feeds everybody. We also can make people healthier because they're not eating the overprocessed crap. We do gluten-free baked goods. You can't tell the difference between the gluten-free stuff and the gluten stuff. I developed those recipes because at the time I was dating somebody that was gluten sensitive. Food is community. How can we be eating 2 separate meals and have any sort of connection over that meal? I tried to eat the gluten-free stuff. It's vile. The texture's not right, the flavor's not right, and it makes me feel bad when I eat it. Stuff I have, you can't tell the difference. You can do that. It just takes, what are your goals? Where are you going? There are markets everywhere. So this is our old mill, this is our new mill. You see the difference? We now have stuff, we do traceability. We actually tell our customers what field the crop was growing in, the day it was planted, when it was harvested. If they want to go to the field, they can go to the field. Nobody's ever wanted to go to the field, but by golly, they like to know that that's possible. The problem is finding your markets, and there's markets everywhere. I started raising dry edible beans. Before I started raising dry edible beans, I drove past a bean company for my whole life and never thought about they were a market. So look around you. What's there that you don't market at because you don't raise the crop? It's not that there's not a market, it's just you don't see it. So we have to look at that. And there's these specialty processors. There's a lot of companies starting to pop up that want things other than wheat, corn, and Milo. They're looking for cover crop stuff. Those cover crop companies like it, but people are eating things like buckwheat and millet and amaranth. We know how to raise amaranth. It grows on its own. Local farmers markets, specialty markets, little drug stores, your local grocery store, the little non-chain ones, or direct to the consumers. These are some of our products. These are things that you have to think about when you raise your crops. You have to see past the blinders that you've ever been told that that's the only thing you can sell. Value your time. We sell a pound of millet flour for $4. That millet is worth 7 cents. The bag that it goes in is worth 47 cents. As farmers, we've always been told the stuff that we raise isn't worth anything. And we've lost our own personal values because of that. When you start doing this, look at what people sell it for in the grocery store or on Amazon or whatever, because they know what that is worth. And those middlemen are getting fat and happy off of our backs. But it takes work. And you earn that money. But when you do it, it's the most rewarding thing you'll ever do. Because there's nothing better than going into a store and seeing something on the shelf and know that what's in that came from your farm. To see that product win national awards. When we were working with the malting company, there was a gluten-free beer company made phenomenal beer. And they were recognized nationally and internationally. And the grain that was in that can was ours. And it's really cool to see that and to have that experience. Suddenly people will see the value of farmers when farmers start doing that. Now, if you produce too much, there's nothing wrong with the commodity market. It's a great place to dump stuff that's not the quality that you demand. They're always there. You can turn money around quick. The problem is, how do you do this? Emily and I have started seeding circles. It all started with farmers asking me how to do it. I wrote a workbook on it. After we developed the workbook, it's like it'd be great if farmers could support each other. So we have an online community where people can join and they have access to that. We have experts. We have an agronomist we're working with. We have a succession planner that's phenomenal that is going to talk with the groups. I'll be on there, other farmers. It's also great if you try to raise a crop that you've never raised before. I've raised crops that haven't been raised within 1,000 miles of my house. And to be able to talk to a farmer that's like, oh, don't do this, is really nice. because you don't take 3 years to figure out how to grow something. You can do it in 2 or 1. So there's opportunities there, and that's what Seeding Circles is all about. This is our original marketing stuff. This logo was developed by my niece, who was 15 at the time. It took her 45 minutes. She talked about it. I said, well, this is really cool. At first it was amazing to me that it took her 45 minutes. That was all. She goes, yeah, you guys do chickens and guineas. You raise grains. She goes, we stylize the sun to represent the sunflowers. And I put everything in the shape of a bee, of the honeycomb cell, because you guys have bees. And I was just blown away. You have family members with talents. See what they'll help you with. I gave her $50. I ripped her off. So, there's my contact information. They're going to run me out of town on a rail. But I'm more than happy to help people figure out what's there. Think about how things are different, because this is the ways that we bring values to our farms so our children can come back. You know, Emily and I, we don't know if our kids are going to want to come back and farm, but now we're going to have a milling company that they can come back and run if they don't want to farm. They might be an educational coordinator on the online community. Who knows? Who knows what opportunities are going to develop, because we look for a different way to farm, because we need to raise different crops to make our soils healthy. Because by making our soils healthy, everybody's better off. Any questions?
Have you tried growing popcorn?
No, I have some friends that raise popcorn, and he's irrigated. Does soil health. He's a phenomenal farmer. Joel Grossbaugh is his name. He raised 7,000 pounds popcorn this last year, and I'm not sure what his contract was, but it was very healthy. You have to be real careful about your harvest moisture, is what you have to watch on popcorn. You don't want it so much that it'll rot in the bag, but you want it enough that it'll be able to produce enough steam to pop. So that's the one thing I can tell you about popcorn, and it's delicious with butter. Real butter, that is.
Why is your no-till conference $200 and ours is $600?
Because we're not there to make any money off you. Honestly, I'm on the board. Our goal is to break even with our conference every year. And we pack the house with vendors. We actually have had a waiting list for vendors since the middle of December. Vendors want to be there because the farmers that are there are some crazy, innovative, really fun group of guys and gals. Equal opportunity.
Buckwheat. Seeding rate, what time of the year, herbicide, harvest?
Okay, so buckwheat is sensitive to everything, so you really have to watch. There's actually some herbicides that are out there that are 2 years back to buckwheat. So be aware of what you've sprayed out there, and that's one of the challenges when you diversify, is there could be something lingering that you don't think about. We've run anywhere from 45 pounds to 60 pounds seeding rate. 60 pounds we like better. There's nothing, well, Post is labeled for grass control. For us, it doesn't work worth a crap. Clethodim won't kill it, but there's research out of the University of Washington that says it affects yield, so that's why it's not labeled for clethodim. You get a good stand of buckwheat growing, it will choke out a lot of stuff. They say that there's no way to direct harvest it. There is. AIM is labeled as a desiccant. And so you could desiccate it and then straight cut it. We tried to use a shellborne. We had way too much shatter because the seed just fell off. So we straight cut, but we still leave more residue than you did with a swather. If you have bees on it, you'll get 20% more yield.
Peas interseeded.
No, bees. Bees, yep. In terms of timing, it doesn't like frost. So Now you could probably push it in the spring a little bit if you wanted to. We usually seed it in the first part of June. After that first flush of Palmer amaranth comes, we'll go in and we'll kill that Palmer, and then we'll drill our buckwheat into it. I work with a guy at Indiana. He actually harvests his triticale, and then he goes buckwheat behind the triticale and double crops it. Buckwheat, you get one good rain on it, it'll make a crop. It's a weed. And so in terms of timing, that's one of the things I encourage guys to look at. We talk about extending that living root. What about double cropping? You pull your weed off, and then you go something behind it, something like buckwheat. It's 90 days from when it goes into the ground until harvest. It's real dependable on that. Millet is the same way. It's like we're extending our cropping year, we're adding another crop, we're reducing our risk because, usually later in the year, you don't have as much hail going on, at least for us. If you get early rains, the one crop will take advantage of it. You get late rains, the other crop gets to take advantage of it. So, and if it doesn't grow, you went out there and you got yourself a cover crop. So, but I love raising buckwheat. It's a great crop.
What about fertilizer on buckwheat?
We put some starter down, and that's about it. But nothing.
It's an excellent scavenger.
Yeah, and it actually gives you things. It doesn't even have to scavenge. So. The great part about commercial buckwheat, not wild buckwheat. Wild buckwheat can be a pain in the butt to kill. Volunteer buckwheat, you hold a bottle of 2,4-D in the hand and you give it a stern look and it'll die. It's really easy to control.
Can you talk more about the too hot and too cold?
So Dr. Randy Anderson's research, what's going on there is he recognizes there's different weed flushes in the year depending upon the soil temperature that's required for weeds to germinate. And so if you get a crop seeded before that flush happens, that crop can shade it out. Or you wait until that flush happens, you terminate it, and then you come in with your crop. So essentially it's timing around that. And then the other thing is, as long as you are no-till, any seed that's left on the surface, the UV rays from the sun will kill that seed after a couple years. So as long as you don't disturb it and let it lie, it'll die from the sun, from insects chewing on it, from it just rotting if you got good cover. So that's the principle behind it. It's not like rocket science. And when that's the thing is, you explain it and you think about it and you're like, yeah, I could figure that one out. But he did a ton of research. When I heard him present it, I heard him present it at the No-Till conference in Burlington, and he was like, given enough crops and enough time, he could develop an organic rotation. And I was like, wow. And then he retired like 3 weeks later. It was like, I see how you are. So, but look up all of his research. He was a prolific writer, very good communicator. So even though he's retired, it's still all out there.